Hello and welcome back around the bonfire to the show, wishing Sparky a happy National Mascot Day. That's the only thing important we're going to do and discuss today. Nothing else matters. This is going to be a full Sparky episode. I don't think a game was even played recently. Tim, Allen, does that sound right to you guys?
It does. It's also, just to be clear, it's Mascot Day when we're recording this. It will not be when you're listening, but that's okay because we know you all observed in your own way. Possibly you gave an offering of some kind to Sparky and other mascots in your life. If not, it's never too late for a little bit late edible arrangements or something of that nature. So,
Yeah, and actually this weekend, Saturday, 9:00, Tim's house, we're going to hold a big birthday party, Mascot Day for Sparky. So show up, bring 10 of your closest friends. Tim will post his address. It'll be great. It'll be awesome. It's going to go from 9 a.m.
Man, although just the last time that we did this, that dude can drink. I'm basically going to have to clear Costco out of liquor in order to get ready for this thing, man.
Yeah, it is not BYOB, by the way. Tim is bringing everything, so don't worry about that.
But you can still bring your own.
Yeah, bring your own too, just in case. But no, welcome back. It's great.
If you don't want Sparky to get to it first, bring your own.
Yeah. Maybe leave it in the car for a few minutes. But we're here. We're recording a little later than usual to a whole bunch of reasons, not least of which being that the Fire are off until the 25th of June as we enter this little FIFA break window that we have for the Gold Cup coming up. But as always, joined by the best in the business, I've got Tim here with me who is hosting the Sparky Get Together. Tim, how are you feeling on this fine sunny Tuesday?
It was hot, cooled off a little bit now that I'm inside with air conditioning, so that's lovely. But yeah, it's just it's like the Chicago summer thing where it's not here and then it smacks you in the face.
Yeah, gotta love it. Also joined, of course, by Alan, the man with the saxophone, the pull with the goal. Alan, how are we feeling today?
Hot. I'm the source of the heat for Chicago for today. That's
Alan. Yeah. Alan, you're attractive. Let's not go overboard with it. Okay,
guys,
you
let's
heard
all
it here first.
Other people can call you hot. When you call yourself hot, it just
Well,
doesn't seem modest.
You just did actually. To be fair,
it's just unequivocally true with me.
Unequivocally. All right. Well, anyway, we're going to move on to things that we are maybe a little bit more adept at talking about, that being some Chicago Fire football. we are here a few days post Chicago Fire loss at home yet again as they lose 2-0 to Nashville on the backs of Hani Mukhtar, Sam Surridge, and if we're being honest, Jonathan Bamba too. He's doing a little bit of service for the folks down south as well. Before we get into talking a little bit more about the game, a couple quick pieces of news. First and foremost, like I mentioned before, happy National Mascot Day to Sparky. Actually, shout out Southpaw too. Just all-time great mascot, I think, in all sports,
Shout out Tommy Blackhawk as well.
Yeah. He's not quite on that level, but sure.
He's not Southpaw level. Southpaw is, I think, undoubtedly Benny the Bull has to be the most famous, but Southpaw has to be the best mascot.
Right. I feel like if we're actually, this could be an interesting episode where we just talk mascots for a while. But I think actually, if you look at cities and rank them by mascot, popularity and effectiveness, I think Chicago is number one running away. The only one that's close is probably Philly. And Gritty's doing a lot of heavy lifting.
Gritty just cleans up though. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Gritty.
Well, and they have the Fanatic too. They have Philly Fanatic. But I think the Fire kind of win, or not the Fire, excuse me, Chicago kind of wins by numbers, right? They might have number one and number two, but Chicago has 3, 5, 7, 10. It's kind of that level of good.
I don't know. Are people still getting bizarre feelings around Mrs. Met? Because that just came out of nowhere for reasons I don't fully understand.
Tim, you need to calm yourself down if you're going to finish this episode without me giving you a yellow card for some behavioral conduct. Okay, we're going to move on because apparently we can't trust him to talk about mascots here.
You know what? Actually,
what do you mean? Actually,
as long as we're not moving out of the news section, I'm happy with it.
Yeah, we're moving on. A quick shout out, happy birthday on recording day to Brian Gutierrez, our U22 homegrown, now turning 22 years old. So hope he is celebrating, not in too much style, but some style. And then last but not least, Alan, I'll kick over to you to talk about this a little bit and we can kind of bat it around a little bit. But as of yesterday, part of the reason we're recording a little bit later, yesterday, Chicago Fire released new renders for the stadium being built at the 78. Couple quick hits, right? There's going to be, as of now, 22,000 seats. 2,000 of those will be safe standing in the supporter section on the south goal line. believe it's going to be the steepest in MLS, and moving significantly closer to the field than we had in Soldier Field. Alan, I'll kind of let you talk through it from your feelings as you kind of
what did you feel when you saw the renderings?
Oh, I genuinely, words cannot express, like when I saw the video that they posted of the sort of like drone POV going down the river and then going into, showing the stadium, going inside, just showing all the different angles and everything. One thing that I just could not stop looking at was the view from the south stand, seeing the Sears Tower. And like you mentioned, the supporter section, it's going to have for 2,000 people. It has safe standing rails. It's going to be the steepest in MLS. And I've also been told that it is only 2 degrees less steep than BVB, Borussia Dortmund's yellow wall. And since, I'm a part of Barn Burners, and we've already been in discussion about like, what are we going to do? And plans are already rolling. So, and like you mentioned, fans are going to be a lot closer. On average, the front row is 16 feet closer to the field than at Soldier Field. And I'm pretty sure at the supporter section, there's only like a distance of 4 feet. But on top of that, there's going to be a water taxi service since it's right on the Chicago River. There's also underground parking, which some people brought up, what about tailgating, but
which is probably not going to be there during the sort of like day one thing. So they unveiled the stadium renderings at a presentation hosted by Mayor or Alderwoman Pat Dowell, who is the alderwoman for like the 3rd Ward, which includes that area. And they kind of mix and match a little bit with the Fire we're showing in their renderings between what we were told is the eventual plan for the 78 when it's completed and the plan for kind of like day one. It looks like the parking structure may not quite be one of those day one things. It like the renderings for like the first years, like 2028, kind of show parking spots along one side of it that would eventually be turned into the parking garage. But yeah, the parking garage, I think, it'll create a really cool atmosphere when coming from Roosevelt, which is currently like a 30-foot raised viaduct. And it'll mean that you'll be able to walk directly from street level to the top of the 100 level bowl without going up any steps, which is kind of cool.
Who was it that said, sunken stadium? Might that be happening? Was that me or was that you, Tim? Was that who actually?
That was you, and I said that you were wrong, and it is not sunken. It is actually at the ground level. But it does appear to be going down from the raised viaduct of Roosevelt. So like that, which is cool, right? It means if you're coming from the water taxi, you will have to go up a little bit. But if you're coming from like the CTA in the north or like anywhere from like the west or like that direction, you will not have to go up any steps.
Yeah. I am just razzing Tim a little bit here because we talked about it a little bit here and there. Alan, what did you?
And I said they weren't going to put a sunken below ground level stadium a couple 100 feet away from a river because rivers are filled with water and water tables are a thing.
Ironically enough, we both kind of ended up being right. Interestingly enough.
Yeah.
Anyway, Alan, what were you going to say there, buddy?
Two things I wanted to add. One is, we talking about the parking. The one thing I wanted to add is that it's definitely going to encourage a lot more people to use public transportation because, first of all, it is literally right down the street from the CTA Roosevelt stop. So that's great for people living on the north and the south taking the red line. It's good for people, southwest as well as to the west taking the green and the orange lines. Not only that, the Metro runs literally alongside, like between Clark Street and where the stadium's going to be, and the LaSalle Street station is not too far away. And honestly, maybe Metro should look into building a station for the Fire Stadium. Like that would,
there wouldn't.
The
plans as they stand right now don't have room for that because of the clearance that you'd need for the station and those things. And also, it's not an electrified rail line, so unlike the CTA, you need a certain amount of space for trains to start and stop and all of that. So I think that's. I think that's like one of those things that I think is just potentially at some point in the future, if 20 years or something like that, the rail becomes electrified. It at the moment, I think it's going to need some way of, kind of massaging the fact that there are still going to be rail lines there. What it does, I think that it's probably welcome to some of the people to the west of the development creates a barrier between the stadium and the 78 and all of that and their homes, because they've been concerned with like new things coming to the neighborhood historically. And so this would keep that barrier. The initial plan for the 78 was for the metro tracks to be relocated. That is not necessary, which will save both time and money, which makes it all the more likely that this will happen in time for 2028. Because the more you've got to do to make that happen, right? Like the bigger the chance the schedule is split.
Yeah, I think above all else, what we're kind of... Oh, sorry, go ahead, Alan, then I'll...
No, it's okay. I just wanted to add something, completely random. Last thing I noticed in the renderings, especially the ones where it shows the full 78 area, is the inclusion of other buildings for entertainment and consumer whatever purposes. That does not include a new White Sox stadium, because the White Sox, when the news was out that the Fire are going to be building their stadium in the 78, the White Sox did make a statement that they're looking to possibly share that area, like have a baseball stadium next to a soccer stadium. So
yeah, and in the presentation that kind of came out that was not really under strong consideration for a while. Related Midwest, basically the developer for the 78 at the town hall where this was unveiled, said that what they were focused on was already a large project, and they were not going to be focusing on another project that was that significant. I think that's their polite way of saying that they don't see any way that the Sox Stadium is happening, and they're not going to, stand around waiting for that to become a possibility. But yeah, the other buildings around it at the north end, there's kind of what they called the gateway area to the north that's starting at Roosevelt, leading to what they call the Fire Plaza. To the north and going south, there's like what they call the Courtyard Square that'll looks like have a mixture of retail and residential, and then a kind of adventure play and recreation area at the south end, along with a completed river walk along the river. So that's going to be cool. None of that's going to be available in 2028, and that is the private development around the part that the Fire are going to be in control of. Joe Mansueto has rights to have interest in some parts of the project, not, I believe, an obligation to be doing those things. And it would probably be Related Midwest partnering with others, possibly including Mansueto getting in financially and in other ways. But the hope would be that the Fire Stadium jumpstarts the 78, which had been stalled for,
God knows how long.
Better part of a decade at this point, before this a stadium was announced.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I think main point here being it's exciting, right? It's exciting, it's concrete, it's far more tangible, to be able to actually see, hey, it's still far out in the future, but here's what we'll get to be working with 3 years down the road, right? And from there, we're going to talk not about 3 years down the road, but about 3 days back, in the other direction down the road.
Nice transition.
Yeah, I do what I can. Chicago Fire losing once again at home 2-0 to Nashville SC. Once again, we are losing in the USMNT Twitter derby, unfortunately. Long and short of the game, we break down that first half. Fire missing 3 big chances early and often. Jonathan Bamba, we'll find, was kind of a key theme of this game, was missing some not easy chances, but chances that you would expect your star DP winger to make. Moving into the second half, you see Kellen Acosta enter for Mauricio Pineda, Andy Nahar entering for Nashville. And from there, it felt like it was kind of all Nashville. I think that's where we saw the quality really start to separate. Hani Mukhtar opened the scoring after being kind of unmarked in the box, getting past what looked to be a pretty gassed Omar Gonzalez. And then Sam Surge with the dagger in the 75th minute. Fire did have, Leonardo Barroso come on, Tom Barlow come on for Marin Haile Selassie, which was, to be candid, a little confusing to me. I was surprised to see Hugo go 90. I was surprised to see Tom come for Marin. But ultimately,
yeah, what that did. Do you want to talk about that, or do we want to?
Yeah, for sure. We can talk about it a little bit.
Mm-hmm. So Yeah, I mean, I think that the plan there was that the Fire were kind of getting outworked and didn't really have numbers going the places they wanted to. So that came with a switch to like a 4-4-2 in possession, and it was kind of like a 4-2-2 2 in, out of possession. And I it didn't do a lot, to be honest, but like the bench also was not very deep in that game.
Yeah, there's a note there of 2 unused substitutions and 1 unused window. So I don't think anybody was overly shocked, right? To be candid, like I wouldn't, it was a little like, oh, no Omari, right? In that situation, that was a little interesting to me. I guess, Tom Barlow is maybe a little more feeding the hot hand, as it were. But yeah, certainly just looking for some kind of change because what was happening wasn't getting home. So Tim, I'll start with you on this one. Same as always. What was your one big takeaway?
Yeah, I think that the biggest takeaway here is that we kind of just feel like the Fire didn't have the pieces they need with this. I know injuries are a factor here, but I think that even excusing for that, right? Like they had better chances, and I think that we saw that with equality. Like you talked about the chances that Jonathan Bamba had. If he'd finished those, we could be talking about a different game. But I still think it was a game where the Fire were not really winning the game in any way in the central areas of the pitch, which obviously, like, that's not where games are ultimately won on the score sheet, like the one place that matters. But that is where you get to impose your will on games and get to put yourself in those situations a little bit more. So the Fire, I think, had the better looking chances. They were not able to convert any of them. In the end, Nashville were able to convert what felt like lower quality chances, but they got them off of dominance in the other 2/3 of the pitch.
Yeah, absolutely. Alan, where are you looking?
Well, I just wanted to first of all share this little fact provided by our good friend Logan with Chicago Fire Daily on Instagram, that the Fire have 1 home win in 7 games, which is the second least in MLS, but 6 away wins in 10, which is the most in MLS. Like, I don't know if there's like some gravitational pull that is pulling those players down, or magnets in the goalkeeper's hands, because I'm pretty sure, if I saw correctly or remember correctly, the Nashville goalkeeper did get into the MLS 11 of the week, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and I think Willis had a good game. I think that the Fire maybe made it a little bit easier for him than they necessarily needed to with some of those things.
Yeah.
Look, I think no, I think overall, from where I'm standing, I think it's kind of just sums it up, right? Tim, you and I had the chance to talk with Ben Wright of 615 Soccer for the preview of this game. If you guys haven't listened, would really recommend going back. Ben just talks a lot about state of Nashville as a club, state of the Fire as a club from the outside. It was a really interesting listen, so would highly recommend giving that a listen.
Also, some bonus USMNT chat after the Switzerland loss, if that's your vibe after a 4-0 loss. If you want to like feel that instead of the 5-0 win they had, obviously against a much weaker opponent, then go back and revisit that with us.
Yep. Yeah. And, and shout out Ben for joining us. If anybody's curious about what you get for coming on the Bonfire, I won't stop talking about it. That's what you get. So you will get free publicity. But anyway, no, I think, I said it to Ben when we were talking about it. I said, this is a game, right? Either club could win. I don't think it would be crazy to think anybody could win this. But if they played 10 times, Nashville probably wins 7. They're just a better team. And I don't know that they're better coached, although I certainly underestimated BJ Callahan. I think he's obviously a very good, very, very much better than I expected him to be. I don't know that they're better coached, but they're a better team. They are better 1 through 31 than the Fire are. And I think right now it's just kind of that simple. You're still a step away. And when you go toe to toe against the big boys, missing, your starting goalkeeper and a few other guys who are important to the club, including, ironically enough, a 17-year-old center back, and Sam Rogers, of course, who is also out. You're just probably
and
not
Carlos Turan, right? So like when you're
perfect,
you're
Carlos Turan,
when you've got your number 1 center back, but not the ones after that, right? Like it's like that's going to be a challenge in any MLS roster. Like I know Andrew Wiebe kind of like made a meme out of like center back depth and always needing more of it, and like FC Cincinnati has just been living that for the past 2 years. But to some extent, like you're just not going to have the best defensive performances most of the time when your second, third, and fourth best center backs are not available in the 11.
Yeah. Yeah. Anytime you're starting your fifth choice center back, it does not bode well. And that kind of will start us on our first, step of the path here, as it were. Um, Jonathan Bamba, as I mentioned before, kind of served up beautifully twice by Brian Gutierrez, who we'll talk about a little bit later in the context of the game he had. Um, into one-on-ones with Joe Willis, who we alluded to before. Joe Willis played well, very good goalkeeper in MLS, guy who deserves probably more credit than he gets for the play he puts out on the field week in, week out, but was just unable to convert. And frankly, it's not even an Andrew Gutman situation where he's hitting him right in the chest. It is not even getting shots on frame. And this has kind of been a running theme of Jonathan Bamba, right? Not necessarily exactly this, but the lack of the finishing touch, the inability to put the ball in the back of the net. Tim, I'll kind of start with you on we're at the halfway point of the season, where you are at with the lack of the finishing touch from Jonathan Bamba and from the club at large.
I mean, look, I don't think it's surprising from anyone. Like, he had, I think, one season with Lille where he had more than 10 goals in a season. And I think that was like a season when he played like 3,000 minutes or something, like really at the high end like that. If like the Fire got Jonathan Bamba because he was on an expensive contract, and that reduced the transfer fee a little bit. But like, the reason he was like a $3 to $4 million transfer for the Fire, as opposed to like a $30 or $40 million transfer to, PSG or, Atletico Madrid or like one of those kinds of clubs, is because he doesn't have that finishing ability, right? And Greg Berhalter talked earlier in the season about wanting to see Bamba taking more of those chances and believing that he could get a goal score out of him, which sounds crazy, right? Like, if the guy has played for like 3 or 4 different teams in Ligue 1, has played in La Liga, and to say that like none of those coaches were able to do it along the way, but Berhalter was going to. But it isn't that crazy when you think it is MLS, right? And something that Bamba's talked about several times when we've spoken to him is one of the things that appealed to him was the belief that he could come and score lots of goals in this league. And I think that we've seen that he can get close. And like, Berhalter has always kind of been a goal scorer whisperer, right? Like, so many guys have come in and had career years under him, including guys that didn't really have a pedigree of doing that beforehand. We haven't seen it so far, and it feels kind of like Hugo Kuipers almost last year, but in a very different context. Of none of the notes that I really had about Kuipers were about him not finishing chances, and with Bamba, it's about him getting the chances and not being able to finish. So it's like a kind of like a flip of that a little bit. But I think that part of that is he's creating a lot of his own chances, and if he was in a system where he wasn't having to create as much, we may see him in better positions to finish. And I think that the goals that he scored, like, that's kind of what's happened with the 3 goals that we've seen out of him. Well, for at least 2 of them. But I think this is kind of, again, like, why he's the player that he is, and not a player that's like playing, for a team that's competing for the, UEFA Champions League spots.
Yeah. I mean, well put. I think this kind of brings me back to a little bit of the thing we've been beating with the drum a little bit now, and I'll toss to you here in a sec just to kind of hear where you're thinking. But there has been an aspect of his game, right, where it is like, we talk about him doing a lot of the dirty work, right? Him kind of getting back, being really integral in the midfield and advancing play. And I think, again, when he was signed, a lot of the commentary was like, look, he'll be the guy who makes the pass to the pass, right? He's going to be very good in build up, very good in hold up, but not necessarily the guy who's going to score for you. And I think a lot of my criticisms of him have been he plays like the guy who thinks he's going to score. And so when you come into this league with that mindset, there is a feeling of, are you maybe not appreciating the level of defending in this league? And we all know MLS is not, a defending talented league, right? That's not where the money is.
That's not where you spend your DP money. Yeah, for sure.
Nope.
Yes. But to act like, but there has been I think there's been a shift in the last few years of like, there's less Aaron Longs and there's more Carlos Terrans. Does that make sense? Like, I do think that position is getting younger. I think people are putting more emphasis on training and developing and finding other players, right? And so I do wonder how much of this is maybe a little bit of the mentality that he has, because, I mean, we can talk about his creation, but like, the 2 goals that he missed that he was wide open on were beautiful setups from Brian Gutierrez. Like, that's what they were. He was gifted those on a silver platter and frankly just missed. So there does come a time where you say, can Marin Haile Selassie finish those chances? We know Philip Zinkernagel can.
I mean, we did see Marin Haile
it's a valid
Selassie out on the
question.
pitch, though, right? Like that's the thing with this one. So it's not really a comparison. And that was actually, I think that's a good point, though, in that, do you feel like Jonathan Bamba was a completely different level difference maker for the Fire than Marin Haile Selassie was? Because I personally, I like, just putting it out there, I don't. Like, I think that Bamba was a little bit better, but I think that they were overall pretty close to being equal.
That's
100%.
what I was going to say.
Yeah, Alan, go ahead.
Comparing, like you mentioned, comparing Bamba to Marin Haile Selassie, I feel like, even though, like you mentioned, quality of Bamba definitely, I would say, is a bit better than Marin Haile Selassie, but in terms of output, in terms of ability that we're currently seeing, especially at that last game, it was fairly equal. And you mentioned that Bamba is going to be the guy that creates the chances. He's going to create those run-ins. He's going to play either the through ball or the cross or whatever. And he is not usually the one that scores the goals, but I feel like seeing like all the different players for the Fire that have scored, he definitely sort of. And I think that this will sort of lead. I'm sorry.
Just you're like should have like you were like
No,
it was a
sorry,
dirty word
no,
almost,
you
but
said that was so
and I get
funny,
it, right? Like because like guys get like there isn't a single like Erling Haaland does not finish most of the chances he gets.
Of course,
he's not even a human being. He's a robot that they put like human flesh coating on, like the Terminator, and allowed on a soccer pitch.
He's a Norwegian robot that got sunburned the moment he stepped into Miami.
They did a very good job with the human flesh on top of the robot. I'm not denying that, but the fact is
really
still
did.
he's like superhuman.
But the last thing I wanted to say, and that sort of leads us into the next thing we wanted to talk about, is that Zinkernagel just left too much of a hole, and a bit too much basically, the amount that he had on his shoulders, the amount that he was carrying on his back, though, was just not distributed evenly between the forward players.
Okay, so here's the one thing that I'd kind of push back against that a little bit, in that like we just said that Marin Haile Selassie, who was only on the pitch for 72 minutes, but he did have some good chances. Like I want to say it was like 11th, 12th minute. He got a shot. It was kind of a weird angle, but it was another shot. Like he was gifted it, I think, pretty well. Coming from Jack Elliott, it doesn't, get enough off of it. I think it ends up being a Fire corner. A couple of minutes later, he is taking the corner, which I thought was, again, an interesting choice, right? Like, he was doing them from that side, but like it could have been Bamba on the other side. And if we're saying that Bamba and Marin Haile Selassie were having around equal games, it would have been Philip Zinkernagel on instead of Marin if he had been available, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think that we kind of got it. Like it's something there, or I guess like you change the formation a little bit, because like if we're saying that Gutierrez had a good game, and I agree he had a pretty strong game, I said this was a game that he really needed to take complete control over for the Fire to get a win. I think he had a good game. I don't think he had a game where that happened, and that's not his fault. Like that's a lot to be putting on him, and I'm not really sure was possible just given what else was happening in the midfield. But it's sort of like, what do you like? There's not really a way right now with the way that the team is playing to have Jonathan Bamba, Marin Haile Selassie, Brian Gutierrez, and Philip Zinkernagel all in the 11 at the same time.
No, but the answer here is not all four of them on the field at the same time. Like, because you made the point there, right? Of like, the goal was for him to take over this game if you wanted to win. He didn't do that. How much more can you ask him to do? Like, if totally honest, right? And I'm not going to say he played like the best game of his career, but like, man, you're telling me you're going to put your very highly paid, even if the transfer fee wasn't huge, DP winger, one-on-one with the keeper multiple times in a game, and you can't get a goal out of it? Like, I'm sorry. And I mean, like, look, he was not perfect on his set pieces, and I still would prefer Philip Zinkernagel to be taking set pieces, right, when they're both available. Mm-hmm. He set up multiple opportunities for Andrew Gutman in the box, for Marin Haile Selassie in the box, for Jack Elliott in the box, off corners and off set pieces. Like, how much more can you ask a guy whose main job is delivery when he spent the whole game delivering and nobody could finish, right? And we can say part of that is Hugo Kuipers probably isn't 100%, just an off day from some other guys. But like, he didn't take over the game. You're right. But this kind of comes back to what we were talking about last week of like, how much are we building this team around Brian Gutierrez, and how much is that setting both sides up to fail?
Yeah, and I think that that's fair because there's some things that he didn't do, I think, that well in this game. Like he wasn't terribly accurate with a lot of his crosses, right? And like that could have been a difference maker, and that's something you would have expected. Like that's something that a guy playing in that position, in that role, right, could be one of the things that you say, this is how he's a difference maker. So we can't really say that about him in this game. I realize that it's not his job to be scoring the goals himself. At the same time, like he's a guy that's taken penalties for the Fire. Like he's not thought of as not a guy that's going to be scoring goals by the coaching staff. And one of the ways that you become a difference maker is like knowing when to come, play forward and go and take a chance yourself. He had one shot in the game. So like, this is maybe like nitpicking a little bit, but I think it shows some of the stuff that you're not getting from Brian Gutierrez. But John, I think to your point, it becomes a question of like, is that a reasonable ask? And if he's not doing what the team needs out of that position, is it mutually beneficial to both sides for him to find an opportunity where Brian Gutierrez can be doing the Brian Gutierrez things, and the Fire can be doing the things that Berhalter wants out of that position in order to have a really successful team?
Yeah, I like I said, I do just think from my perspective, because I feel like I owe him this, as I've been pretty critical of him. Like, I think he played well. I think he's the only reason they had a chance to win. Actually, not the only reason, but going forward, he was one of the few bright spots, right? If we're being honest about the performance there, but we'll transition a little bit here, unless somebody wants to comment on what I just said. But we'll talk a little bit about kind of the missing piece from this past Saturday, which was Philip Zinkernagel. Which, congratulations to Philip Zinkernagel. He was actually getting married this weekend, which is why he was not in attendance. The club put that out on socials today, so really exciting for him. Congratulations, even though it means we lost a game. Disappointing in that respect, but happy for him. But Alan, to your point, it did seem he left too large a hole in that forward attack for the Fire to compensate. Tim, I feel like you've got a look on your face that says you have a feeling about that, and I would love to hear it.
Well, no, the look on my face is just to point out that you and he got married within a few hours of each other.
That's what I was just about to say. Also, congrats to John.
Speaking of pictures of somebody getting married on the Fire social media, if you want to scroll back to Saturday. Getting married, but you will see the Mr. and Mrs. jerseys that they got, field side seats, and congrats to both of you.
The TikTok that they posted was genuinely it was adorable. I loved it so much. I couldn't stop smiling, honestly. Just seeing the Twitter thread and then seeing it happen. Like, how good was the champagne that Sparky gave you? I'm surprised he didn't drink it himself.
Yeah, right. I offered it to him. He was not interested. Thank you both for the kind words. It was a shout out to the club for that. It was a really, really wonderful time. If you guys aren't familiar, my now wife, not a huge soccer fan, but I was like, what can I do to get her to go to this game? And the club was kind enough. They gave us field side seats. They gave us some custom jerseys that said bride and groom on the back. So that was a blast. And Sparky brought us some champagne and cake. So it was a lot of fun. Super cool experience for us. But yeah, a wedding full of weekends for Chicago Fire. Or weekend full of weddings, excuse me, for Chicago Fire. We'll say that much.
It's all right.
But to the point at hand, being that Philip Zinkernagel left a hole in the Chicago Fire attack. Tim, this time I will ask you to talk about Philip Zinkernagel's absence and kind of what that means as we move into the back half of the season, where we expect some of these guys who've been playing the European schedule to be a little more, not down and out, right, but a little more on their last legs, as they've been playing for over a year at this point.
So, last year, it's something that I brought up to Greg Berhalter, and last year we kind of saw Alan Aragoni. Part of the agreement that the team made with him as part of his loan was that he would be getting time off. We saw him take a few weeks off, and according to the social media, at least looked like he was having a lot of fun in Miami. Zinkernagel kind of he played, I want to say, like 1,500 minutes in the 23 to 24 season. I don't think he played a ton over the last year coming before the Fire, so he was kind of already somewhat rested. Bamba was the one that Berhalter identified as being the one that was most in need of a rest, just given the number of minutes he'd played in Europe before coming here. And I I'm still not 100% clear on what he meant by this, and we'll ask for clarification when we talk to him soon, but it'll be obvious anyways. He mentioned that there's going to be time off for him, including in June. I don't know if he just meant this 10-day break, because the team did take a few days off from structured activities, so players got a little bit of a break from like Sunday, I want to say, through Tuesday, and are back at it. Tomorrow, when we're recording on Wednesday, is their first day back at a training. I don't know if like that's the break, if he's getting more time off with the break, and is just expected to be ready for the next game against Philadelphia, coming in training, like say early next week or something. I don't know exactly what the plan is yet with that, but my read on it is probably that the time off is just the time off built into the schedule, and that they're not expecting Jonathan Bamba to need to miss game time as a result of that. Zinkernagel, the time off for that weekend was understandably a deal breaker for him, negotiating a contract with the Fire. So if they wanted any Philip Zinkernagel, they were going to have to deal with the Philip Zinkernagel not being there for this weekend. And I honestly think at this point we can all say that was probably a worthwhile move from the Fire making that deal.
Imagine we didn't get him because they were like, no, you cannot get married this day.
Well, then, we would not have seen Philip Zinkernagel put together like what is kind of, I think, you can make a case for being like a team MVP level season so far. So,
pretty crazy year for him. I think overall, just kind of looking back over the course of the season, what we look at now, I think it's kind of clear. We talked a little bit about, right, generally speaking, where we do seem to be missing something, right? We're still a step away, still a window away. And I think this just kind of reinforces that when the next guy up mentality doesn't quite fill that role. And it's, you just look not lost, right? But when your starting nine isn't 100%, your left wing isn't quite converting, your right wing is playing well, but maybe just isn't quite to the level. It does kind of throw a wrinkle into things. Alan, how are you feeling? I think what I wrote down on the outline was like, is this performance, without Zinkernagel, right? Something or nothing to you? And so I'll ask you that question, like, is it something or nothing?
I want to lead towards something, because you mentioned, I feel like we've been mentioning this for at least the past 2 seasons, that there's always just a piece or a few pieces that are missing from the puzzle. And every time it feels like we're getting those pieces, it feels like another piece is missing. So I think this was just the case of the huge piece that Zinkernagel has in this team as Mr. Team, as he mentioned. He's having like a team MVP season essentially. So
yeah, and I think that like in terms of the pieces that are missing, right? I think that all of it, like, and Berhalter's been open about this, that the team needs to make more changes in order to be where he wants the roster to be. And I think that that's pretty obvious to everyone, right? Like, I don't think anyone is like this, like, look at these guys and like, this is a team that should be winning MLS Cup. It isn't just a question of the system. It isn't a question of like the best coach. And I think that's something that we kind of saw against Nashville, right? Is like, Nashville is a team that made the playoffs every year, except the previous season had a lot of the pieces that were making the playoffs every year. They fixed a lot of the issues they had in their midfield when they let go of Dax McCarty, which I think everyone recognizes now as a mistake, because if you have Dax McCarty, you will always miss not having Dax McCarty after that. Yeah, we still do up here. But it's a play, like, Nashville is a playoff caliber roster, and it kind of always was, and it got stronger. And Berhalter came in after BJ Callahan came into Nashville. He's had less time to establish the system, and he didn't have the pieces, right? Like, the front office turned over 15 players on the roster, which is half of it. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of work, but it also shows that there's more work that needs to be done. Like, contracts that I think we thought were unmovable were moved, which was like remarkably good work, but like, you're not going to build everything back exactly the way that you want it in one transfer window, especially considering it's the winter window, which is the time that like the best players in the world in Europe and South America are not generally moving.
Absolutely. And now last thing we'll kind of talk before we wrap here. Fire now off until June 25th, when they will be facing, and guys, I apologize, I don't have the schedule in front of me. Is it Philadelphia? Am I remembering that right?
It is. Yep. It's like 10 days before. It's kind of funny. It got super hot They played Philadelphia last year, like the day before July 4th. I want to say it was kind of like, so it was like a holiday midweek game, as weird as that sounds. And it was scorching hot then. So it just feels like when it gets scorching hot, Philadelphia comes in for some reason.
Yeah. It's a midweek game, and then we're playing against Charlotte the following Saturday.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So Charlotte the 28th, Philadelphia the 25th, which gives the Fire exactly 1 month from their next game to the opening of the summer transfer window in MLS if you're not a Club World Cup team. And so, I think over this break and then in the following weeks, I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts. Just what should be the priority, right? Because I think we all know, like, when the window opens, you target a center back, you maybe target a midfielder, you maybe target a winger if Chris Mueller still isn't back. But over these next, we'll call it 5 weeks, who is doing what to try and cement their roles or improve the squad, whether that be Greg, a player, whomever. Big picture, small picture, whatever you think. Tim, I'll start with you.
Yeah. So, I mean, the Fire right now are in a position they don't have a ton of empty roster spaces, right? So it's going to have to be they can get a DP in. They will need to work a little bit to get the international slot. I don't think that'll be a big deal. We've talked about that previously. I think that DP is going to be huge, and it'll say something about the ambition level of the team when they can't get Neymar or Kevin De Bruyne in, because those are the big names that were linked. And to be honest, I think that may end up working well for the team, because I think Neymar would have been more about off the pitch than on the pitch difference. And Kevin De Bruyne would have been about an on the pitch difference a lot more, but I don't know that he is the best player that the Fire, I don't think that is exactly the player that the Fire would need, other than the fact that he's Kevin De Bruyne, right? So I think that it'll be interesting to see how high the team is swinging with this and what they end up landing, if again, knowing that it's not going to be like those two kind of like global superstar level players, and then just see kind of like if the team is able to move on, because they also are kind of in a cap like a cap crunch, not exactly, like not as bad as like the LA Galaxy, but and the team hasn't gotten any GAM from player sales this year, and so they can get up to $3 million in cap space by moving players on and selling them abroad, selling them for cash with an MLS or something like that. And if they're able to do that, that opens a lot of flexibility other places on the roster. But they need that cap space to be able to make it. So I'm curious to see who may move out. And again, like the transfer windows are opening in Europe first. So, it's open in a few countries now. So like players could potentially be out before the next game. I don't anticipate to be that to be the case, but it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out, and if it's additions before subtractions, because it can only be one, or subtractions before additions, and all of that.
I'm going to throw something out there, and Alan, I'll let you go on it first, and then Tim, if you have thoughts on it, you're welcome to comment on it. A couple interesting thoughts that kind of popped into my head as you were talking there, Tim, just about player movements, right? We've seen some links between Carlos Terán and Newell's Old Boys in Argentina. I do feel like there's always been some talk about him going back to South America at some point, somebody else trying to get the most out of him and then sell him on, right? So that is certainly on the table, right, in terms of a move that could happen. The second one, I think,
I don't know that he moves if he's injured, right, and he hasn't been playing. And so that's the big challenge, and I don't think he'll be healthy in time, which is unfortunate. And we've seen that several times. The team was close to being able to get a significant deal for him and a significant return on their investment previously, and then he was injured. He's injured a lot. At some point, that does affect your transfer value, but like he just doesn't move if he's not healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. And more so to the point of like, how much of a fee would you need if you're the Fire just to clear that roster spot and get something back for him? I think is maybe an interesting conversation to have, because if you're Newell's, do you maybe offer something low with a high sell on in the hopes that, hey, maybe it'll turn into something and we'll just take him off your books, get him out of your room. I think that's just an interesting concept to think about. The other thing I've been kicking around a little bit in my head recently is the idea of, and I don't think this would happen just purely for the optics sake of it, but given what's already happened in MLS this year, the thought of a Brian Gutierrez cashfer, right? I think that's an interesting thought. I really do. And we've talked a lot in the last few weeks about how well does he fit in this system? Do we feel like maybe he needs to move on? And, maybe a PSV isn't interested in taking that risk, but could I'm trying to think of another club off the top of my head, but I'm just going to say, for sake of saying it, like San Jose, Would they be interested in a guy like Brian Gutierrez to serve the ball up to Chicho Arango? I don't know. I think that's maybe an interesting conversation to have, right? In terms of like creating money, creating games so that they can go out and make some more moves in this summer window.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be the challenging. I don't see how a cash would really work that well for Brian Gutierrez, just because it would be the same issue that the Fire had against Nashville, right? Where like the closest comparison to a player is Diego Luna, about the same age, like, different way of playing a similar place on the field, right? Like different position.
Yeah.
And RSL kind of was willing to not quite build a team around Diego Luna, but like he is the guy that powers the attack, and he hasn't been able to power it that far this season because of the pieces around him. But they were willing to trust him with that, and I don't think that any GM, like chief soccer officer, whatever person around MLS is going to be willing to do that to Brian Gutierrez at the moment, just because he hasn't shown that he can do it, versus like a PSV where they can afford to spend significant outlays on a guy. And if he doesn't work out, it's not the end of the world. If Brian Gutierrez, if someone at Brian Gutierrez's cap hit, especially with a cash for, doesn't work out, you're kind of SOL because you can't easily move on and replace him.
Yeah, no, fair point. Alan, where are you thinking with this?
No, I mean, just listening to all this is just having all the gears in my head spinning in terms of what needs to happen in like the next 10 days. I just want to think a bit more short term, honestly. My brain not too big to think long term. I'm thinking micro instead of macro. Players just need to, first of all, get a little bit of rest, especially in this weather, and just keep on sort of thinking in the situation that they are. Do they need to really push the limits to show that they can stay here? Do they need to think about about going somewhere else that fits their ability? And Greg just is going to keep looking at players to swap in and out, because like you guys said, this isn't exactly a team that's going to win MLS Cup or other competitions, but it's definitely an improvement. I'll say that. With Open Cup, I'll say that's definitely a possibility. Even with like the injured players and everything. So,
well, that's going to be a big challenge, right? And I think that's the thing. I think that you hit the nail on the head. Like, but between now and the next few weeks, the Fire need to focus on getting healthy as much as possible. Like they now have the training center with all the recovery facilities and everything there that's available. And I mean, that's huge. Because to get to the Open Cup, final, you have to get past the quarterfinal and the semifinal. And the quarterfinal is against one of the top teams in MLS this year in Minnesota United, who like continually teams think that they can try to like play with the ball and make Minnesota playing against the ball not work out for Minnesota. And teams have continually failed at that. And I think that sets Minnesota up really well against the way that the Fire play. Now, Greg is not as dogmatic as some of the times that Minnesota has been really successful with that kind of play. But that game is coming up on July 8th. So there's not a lot of time between now and then for players to get back, get healthy, and the team to get into some kind of a groove.
Absolutely. I think the last thing I'll kind of touch on before we go, and I think this will be, maybe we'll do something kind of transfer related as we get closer to the window. Tim, to your point about there's no GAM, right, from no player sales, and it's going to be tough to move on from guys. I do think there's an interesting conversation around, do you go 2 DPs, 4 U22s for the back half of the season as well? I know they want a DP, right? But just from a roster building perspective, would it make sense to bring in another young player? Because I do think there's an assumption Brian Gutierrez will be gone. And, who knows how long Jay Davia will be for the squad. I mean, I think we all expect him to be around. I would say if anybody's going, it would be hopefully Brian Gutierrez on a big transfer to go play in Europe. I wouldn't be shocked, and I think that may even be the smarter move of let's kind of holding pattern unless you can get the guy that will make the team better on all levels, right? As opposed to just who's a big name, who's a good player we can get in, right?
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. Greg has said that the team is comfortable going 2 and 4, and that's an option. They would get another $1 million in GAM because you get $2 million in GAM. The Fire pick one of them. They would get the other one if they decide to stick that route, which again would help with like roster flexibility elsewhere. I don't think they're going to want to commit to 2-4 for the long term. So they're not going to want to put themselves in a place where they have 4 U22 players that they think will be on the roster in, say, 2026 and onwards. I think that what we're seeing is like the more ambitious teams in MLS may go 2 DP4 U22s at a time when they're still building and finding the pieces and figuring things out to get the extra GAM. And then once they kind of feel like they're getting close to where they want to be, they go for the third DP, because that's where you can really swing for the fences. That's where you can use the financial advantages that your ownership and whoever else whatever you've got is, making available to you, and bring in players that really will be true difference makers that are just like a more proven thing, right? Because like what we saw with, Jay Davila is a good point of that. Like, he has not been a difference maker for the Fire so far. Lionel Barroso has been in spurts, but he has not been a game in, game out starter. And I think that says something about his development. And so that's not a way that you get guaranteed difference makers. And I think the way the team is looking to get.
100%. Fellas, I think that is as good a place as any to wrap up. Anything you guys want to add before we close out here? Perfect. Oh, Alan, what were you going to say?
The one thing I was going to say, because I mentioned earlier in the podcast that, the supporter groups are already excited and making ideas towards the new stadium. So if you're listening to this and you want to maybe hop on the supporter hype, there is going to be like a little meeting where the musicians practice all the different songs and chants, both Sector Latino as well as Section 8 groups. So if you're interested, reach out to a group, for example, Barn Burners or Redline or even Sector Latino, how you can be a part of that, because we need to. I feel like we need to keep building the supporter section so that it is instead of a 2 groups combined to make songs and chants, and then just everyone around just sort of semi-participating or not participating at all. We want to get to 2028 where all 2,000 or as close to 2,000 people are constantly standing, constantly bumping with instruments, drums, and all that. So reach out to your preferred or any of the supporter groups, how you can get on that.
Yeah, wonderfully said, Alan. As we've said plenty of times on this show and all the others as well, the only way the community grows, the only way things get better is if we all work at it together, right? So
Amen.
Absolutely would welcome it if you have an interest. And even if you don't, just go anyway, right? And, maybe while you're there, tell everybody to listen to the Bonfire, right?
Bring a friend.
There we go.
Yep.
Yeah.
Bring a friend in. If you don't have any friends, bring a friend of me. Or just like someone sitting next to you on the bus.
True.
Bring your brother. Yeah, bring that guy on the bus. Look, if you take public transit to work every day, everybody has that one guy, that one person who they see every day because you just happen to be getting off at the same stop at the same time. Like, hey man, what are you doing on Sunday? You want to come to the supporters group thing? Like, I don't have anybody to bring. That could be a new friend right there. Then you made a new friend.
Right there.
But anyway, we'll be back early next week to preview Chicago Fire and Philadelphia Union at Soldier Field as the Fire look for their second home win of this season in June. We'll be back later next week, so no preview, obviously, in the back half of this week as there's no game. But we tried to keep you as close to our normal schedule as we could. But in the meantime, make sure you stay posted. You can follow us on all socials, Men in Red 97, on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, right? Pretty much everywhere you could want to learn about Chicago Fire, we'll be there. You can also check out the website,
I don't think we post. I don't think anyone knows how to post there, so maybe that's not the best place. Not gonna lie.
Well, nobody that listens to this is 78. So
actually, there is a dude that's not that far off that age that I do know listens to us. So,
okay. Well, my apologies, sir. You should get on Twitter. It's a good. Well, maybe.
No, it's not.
It's a little bit loaded.
Like what?
It's a loaded.
You caught yourself. It's there.
Yeah,
it's there.
Just go to the website. Just go to meninred97.com. When you're there, you can read all sorts of reporting from all of our writers, Tim, Alex, Max. I pop up once in a while there as well. Would love to have you there. It's where you can keep up to date. That's where pretty much the most breaking news comes out if you're not on social media. And of course, keep an eye out. We'll have a new episode of Hot Takes coming out later in the month, as well as it'll hopefully be the whole gang once again getting together to talk a little crap, talk a little ball, and chat a little bit with the boys. But again, thank you so much for being here. Again, if you didn't have the opportunity, I would recommend going and listening to our last episode. It was a preview of the Nashville match, but also just a cool conversation with Ben Wright of 615 Soccer, talking a little bit about where Nashville is at in their process, where he sees the Fire at from a more national perspective, right? He's a contributor for some larger publications as well. Just a really interesting conversation with him about kind of the outlook of the Eastern Conference and what that means for both clubs. But in the meantime, thank you so much for being here. It means the world. We're always happy to be able to do this for you. Thank you so much for joining us around the bonfire, and come on, you men in red.